I grew up in a house where nothing was ever said directly, but everything was understood. We weren't poor enough to ask for help, but we were never comfortable either. My father worked construction, seasonal jobs, unpredictable pay. My mother sold vegetables at the local market. Money was always tight, but somehow it stretched further for my younger brother. He was 11 when I was 13. 2 years younger, 2 years softer, 2 years more protected. There was an unspoken rule in our house. He was the investment. I was the insurance policy. He started math tutoring in 3rd grade. I stopped mine in 5th because we needed to save. He got a brand new bicycle for middle school. I inherited a rusted one from a cousin. When he brought home average grades, my mother would say, "It's okay, we just need to support you more." When I brought home top scores, my father would say, "That's expected, you're the older one." There was never celebration for me, only responsibility. I didn't hate my brother. He didn't ask to be chosen, he just was. When I was 13, I took the entrance exam for a provincial boarding school. No prep classes, no tutors, just borrowed books and late nights. I didn't tell my parents until after I took the test. Hope was dangerous in our house. 2 months later, the results were posted online. My name ranked 8th in the entire province. Full scholarship, tuition covered, dorm covered, meals covered. For the first time in my life, I felt possibility. I printed the acceptance letter and walked home slowly, reading it again and again. I thought maybe this time, they would see me. My father read the letter without expression. My mother didn't smile. Instead, my father asked, "If you go, who helps here?" "I can come home on weekends," I said. He shook his head. My mother spoke calmly. "We can't afford 2 children chasing big dreams." "I have a full scholarship," I reminded her. "There are always extra costs," she replied. "Books, travel, emergencies." Then she looked at my brother. "He'll be entering secondary school next year. This is when investment matters most." Investment, that word again, that's when I understood. The scholarship wasn't the problem. Priority was. 2 weeks later, my father sat me down at the kitchen table. "You'll go stay with your Uncle Min for a while," he said. "He needs help at the farm." "For how long?" "A year, maybe 2. "And school?" "We'll see." My mother added softly, "You're the older brother. Sometimes that means sacrifice." It wasn't anger. It wasn't punishment. It was strategy. My future for his. I packed 1 backpack, clothes, a few books, the acceptance letter. Before I stepped out the door, I stopped. I turned around and looked at them, really looked at them, at my father standing by the wall, at my mother with her arms folded, and I asked one last time, "So you're really sending me away?" They didn't answer, but they didn't have to. The silence wasn't hesitation, it was confirmation. My mother looked past me. My father looked at the floor. That was my answer. My brother stood in the doorway. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He had already been chosen. I wasn't angry at him. I was angry at the system. My uncle lived nearly 300 kilometers away. Coffee fields, chickens, red dirt roads. Work started at 5 a.m., ended when the sun disappeared. The first month, I sent almost everything I earned back home. No complaints. After 3 months, my uncle called me into the kitchen one night. "Do you want to study?" he asked. "Yes," I said immediately. He looked at me for a long time. "Then you will." I need to send money home, I replied. He poured more tea and said something I didn't fully understand back then. Family isn't always right just because it's family. The next month, he reduced my workload. At night, I studied again. 2 years later, I retook the exams. This time, no one stopped me. That was the last time I asked my parents for permission, and the last time they had control over my future. 2 years after I left home, I took the exams again. This time, I didn't sit for them with hope. I sat for them with necessity. I already knew what it felt like to be replaced. I wasn't going to live through that twice. I passed, but there was no one to celebrate with. I called my uncle. He only said one sentence. "You earned it. No fireworks, no party." But I knew something important. This one was mine. I moved to the city with an old suitcase and the equivalent of $300 my uncle pressed into my hand. I stayed in the cheapest dorm available. 4 men to a room. A ceiling fan that rattled all night. Thin mattresses that never quite let you sleep deeply. There were months when I calculated every meal. There were nights when dinner was just rice and soy sauce. I never called home to complain. I didn't want to hear, "We told you so." I worked part-time unloading trucks at a warehouse during the night shift. Then I went to class in the morning. One semester, I nearly failed 2 courses, not because I wasn't capable, because I was exhausted. There was a week when I seriously considered dropping out for a year and working full-time. That night, I called my uncle. He didn't comfort me. He asked one question. "If you quit, where will you go back to?" I didn't answer. He continued, "You don't have a place to go back to anymore, so move forward." It was cold, but it was true. During my second year, I received a message from my mother. "Your brother is preparing for entrance exams. He needs extra tutoring. Can you send more?" "No." "How are you?" "No." "Are you eating well?" "Just the amount." I transferred the money, not because I needed approval, but because I didn't want my brother to feel financial pressure the way I once had. A year later, another message. "The roof is leaking. We need repairs." I sent money again. I never refused, but I was never thanked either. Eventually, I realized something. I was no longer a son. I was a quiet source of support. I graduated with solid grades. Not top of the class, but strong enough. I started at the lowest position in an agricultural distribution company. The salary wasn't impressive, but I understood the product. I understood seasons. I understood farmers. The years I spent on my uncle's farm became leverage, something the city employees didn't have. I didn't jump from job to job chasing titles. I moved steadily, slow, deliberate. By 26, I was promoted to regional operations manager. Around the same time, I started investing small amounts of my income. Nothing flashy, just disciplined. When I turned 25, my uncle began handing over real responsibility. Contract negotiations, supplier agreements, long-term crop planning. One day, a buyer offered to purchase a portion of the farm's land at what seemed like a reasonable price. My uncle asked me what I thought. I said, "Land isn't just dirt. It's 10 years of revenue if managed right." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Good," he said. "You're thinking long-term." Gradually, I wasn't just helping at the farm anymore. I was running parts of it. In 15 years, I returned to my hometown twice. Once for my grandmother's funeral, once for my brother's wedding. At the wedding, my father introduced me to guests by saying, "This is the older one. He works far away." He didn't mention the money I'd sent. He didn't mention the years I'd worked. Just the older one. I didn't correct him. By then, I understood something clearly. I was no longer central to their story, and I had stopped trying to be. As my uncle grew older, I spent more time back at the farm. One evening, he handed me a folder. "Keep this," he said. Inside were the guardianship transfer papers from 15 years ago. Signed, stamped, legal. I looked up. "You still kept these?" He nodded. "Paper doesn't change with emotion," he said. "People do." At the time, I didn't think much about it. I folded the documents and put them away. He died quietly one morning. No hospital room, no machines, just a man who had finished what he set out to do. I handled the funeral. I handled the legal filings. A week later, I received a call from a law office. The reading of the will was scheduled for March 14th. I thought it would be procedural, routine. I didn't realize that the decision made 15 years ago was about to return. The law office was located in an older building downtown. No large sign, no crowded reception area, just a long hallway, yellow lighting, and the faint smell of old paperwork. I arrived 15 minutes early, not because I was nervous, because I've learned that when documents are involved, emotions don't matter. Timing does. I assumed this would be procedural. My uncle had no wife, no biological children, no one else who had managed the farm with him for years except me. I didn't expect complications. Then the elevator doors opened. I heard footsteps before I turned, some sounds you don't forget. I looked up. My father, my mother, and my younger brother. All three of them. They weren't dressed like people attending a loss. My mother wore a dark formal dress, hair neatly arranged. My father's white shirt was freshly pressed. My brother stood slightly behind them, avoiding eye contact. They weren't surprised to see me. That told me everything. My mother stepped forward first. "We need to talk." Her voice wasn't emotional, not warm, not cold, just controlled. "About what?" I asked. My father answered for her. "About the family's share." The word family, used so casually, as if 15 years ago had never happened. We stood there before entering the conference room. The tension wasn't loud, it was quiet, the kind that sits in your chest. My father spoke first. "No matter what happened before, you're still our son." I held his gaze. "Am I?" He didn't respond directly. My mother stepped in. "We don't want this to become complicated." "In what way?" I asked. She looked at me steadily. "Your uncle didn't have children. Naturally, his assets should return to the family." "Naturally," I nodded once. "Whose definition of natural?" My father frowned slightly. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Without family, you wouldn't be where you are today." That sentence landed clearly. I answered slowly. "Without family, I wouldn't have had to leave at 13. Silence. The conference room door opened. The lawyer invited us in. A long wooden table, 5 chairs, a small recording device placed in the center. The attorney, Mr. Hung, studied each of us carefully. He understood this wasn't routine. He began reading the initial provisions: funeral expenses, outstanding taxes, bonuses to 2 long-term farm employees, everything normal. but across the table I could feel it. Expectation. My father sat upright, hands flat on the table like he was preparing for negotiation. My mother took documents out of her purse. They hadn't come unprepared. After a few clauses, my father interrupted. Legally speaking, do biological relatives have priority rights? The attorney didn't answer immediately. He removed his glasses, folded them slowly. That depends on the legal status at the time the will was executed, my mother added quickly. We are his biological parents. The attorney nodded. Biologically, yes. Silence. Their confidence didn't waver. They believed blood would win. The attorney opened a separate sealed envelope. The next section concerns a supplementary clause dated August 17th, 15 years ago. My mother's posture changed slightly. What clause? She asked. He turned a few pages. A clause regarding guardianship transfer and legal inheritance eligibility. I saw my father's shoulders tighten. How does that concern us? He asked. The attorney looked directly at him. It concerns you directly. The atmosphere shifted. Not panic, not yet, but the first crack in certainty. My mother turned toward me. You knew about this? Yes. One word, no explanation, no defense. My father's voice hardened. How far are you planning to take this? I met his eyes. I'm not taking it anywhere. The paperwork already did. The attorney placed the folder flat on the table. I will now read the full content of the supplementary clause. The room went still. Every decision made 15 years ago was about to be repeated in black ink. And this time, no one could dismiss it as a moment of emotion. The attorney opened a thicker section of the file. He didn't rush. He adjusted the recording device on the table. Then he began. This supplementary clause was executed on August 17th, 15 years ago, on the same date as the voluntary transfer of guardianship. My mother interrupted. What guardianship transfer? The attorney looked at her calmly. The voluntary transfer of full legal guardianship from you and your husband to Mr. Min, who has been the legal guardian of your son since that date. The room went still. My father spoke carefully. That was temporary. The attorney flipped the page. The document states, full legal responsibility and decision-making authority shall be transferred until the minor reaches legal adulthood. There was no word temporary, no word assistance, just full transfer. My mother leaned forward. That has nothing to do with inheritance rights. Her voice was no longer steady. The attorney continued reading. Clause 3. In the event the ward maintains independent legal status separate from the biological family, any assets formed, developed, or accumulated under the guardian's authority shall not be subject to inheritance claims from the biological family. My father frowned. What exactly are you saying? The attorney rested his hand on the document. I'm saying that from the date of guardianship transfer, your son ceased to be legally represented or financially dependent under your household. A long pause followed. No one raised their voice, but everyone understood. The attorney turned to the final page of the supplementary clause. Addendum, Year 10, following guardianship transfer. All agricultural land, processing facilities, investment accounts, and related business assets managed by Mr. Min shall transfer directly to the legally recognized ward in the absence of a spouse or biological children. He paused, then read the final sentence. The biological family hereby voluntarily relinquishes any claim, interference, or inheritance rights relating to the ward from the date of signing. My mother stood up abruptly. We never gave up our rights as parents. The attorney calmly turned back to the first page. Both of their signatures were there, stamped, notarized. This document reflects voluntary consent, he said. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I simply watched them, not angry, not triumphant, just present. My father stared at the table. He remembered. He remembered the day they told me I had to leave, the day they decided I was negotiable. My mother spoke more quietly now. We thought it was the best solution at the time. For the first time since the reading began, I responded. And today, this is the best result. The attorney closed the folder. Therefore, in accordance with the valid will and the supplementary clause, all agricultural land, processing facilities, financial assets, and business interests are transferred in full to you. He looked directly at me. You are the sole heir. No conditions, no footnotes, just clarity. My brother finally spoke. You're really keeping everything? I looked at him. Who's been keeping it running for 15 years? He didn't answer. My father tried one last angle. We can negotiate. I shook my head. Negotiate what? You already signed. The room fell silent. 15 years ago, they decided I no longer belonged. Today, the paperwork confirmed it. After the attorney said, "You are the sole heir," no one stood up right away. The words lingered in the air. My mother sat down slowly. My father stared at the documents like he was still searching for a loophole. My brother was the first to speak. So, you're really keeping everything? There was no accusation in his voice, just confusion. I looked at him. Who's been keeping it running for 15 years? He didn't answer. My father cleared his throat. We should talk privately. I think everything that needed to be said was said here, I replied. He turned to the attorney. We didn't fully understand what we were signing back then. The attorney didn't hesitate. The document was read aloud before signing. It was notarized. There were witnesses. My father didn't argue that. Instead, he turned back to me. No matter what happened, you're still our son. That sentence came 15 years too late. I wasn't angry. It just didn't carry weight anymore. When was I your son? I asked quietly. No one answered. My mother spoke softly. We're proud of you. It was the first time I had ever heard that from her. Not when I earned the scholarship, not when I graduated, not when I got promoted, but now that they had lost leverage. I looked at her calmly. Pride wasn't part of the agreement. Silence filled the room again. My brother turned toward me. You never blamed me, he said. I didn't, I replied. If I were in your position at 11, I wouldn't have objected either. He lowered his head. My shop hasn't been doing well lately. I already knew. People talk, but I hadn't asked. I wasn't a silent bank account anymore. My father spoke again. This isn't how family should be. I met his eyes. Family hasn't been what you think it is since I was 13. It didn't break today. Today just named it. My mother's voice trembled slightly. So you're cutting us off? I'm not cutting anyone off, I said. I'm just not carrying anyone anymore. There's a difference. I don't hate them, but I don't owe them either. In the hallway, my brother caught up with me before I reached the elevator. Are you really not going to help them anymore? That depends. Depends on what? I won't send money, I won't invest for them, I won't guarantee loans. He stayed quiet. I continued. But if you want to learn how to rebuild your business, I'll help. He looked up. No money? No money. A pause. Just guidance. He nodded slowly. Money keeps people dependent. Knowledge forces them to grow. I let them leave first. For 15 years, I had been the one sent away. This time, they walked away from me. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel broken. I felt aligned. 15 years ago, they made a decision. Today, that decision completed its cycle. They signed away the right to control my future. And today, I signed back control over my life. This time, no one could ask me to sacrifice. 1 year passed after the will reading. The farm was no longer just an inheritance. It was responsibility. And this time, I wasn't handed responsibility because someone else decided my role. I chose it. I restructured the entire operation, invested in new machinery, standardized the processing systems, signed long-term export contracts instead of seasonal spot deals. Revenue increased, not dramatically, but steadily. I didn't build a mansion. I didn't buy a luxury car. Instead, I renovated the workers' housing on the property, raised their wages. My uncle once told me, land stays good if the person holding it stays decent. I kept that. 3 months after the will reading, my brother called, not to ask for money. He asked, "Can you look over my books?" I flew back for a day. We sat inside his small shop until late evening. I pointed out unnecessary expenses, poor inventory timing, cash flow mistakes. He listened. No defensiveness, no pride in the way. For the first time, we spoke as two adults, not as the brother who sacrificed, not as the brother who was chosen, just two men responsible for their own outcomes. 6 months later, his shop started turning a small profit. He texted me, "Thank you." It wasn't long, but it was enough. My father didn't call. My mother sent a message during Lunar New Year. "Wishing you peace this year. No requests, no mention of the past." I replied, "Wishing you good health." Short, respectful. The distance remained, but it wasn't heavy anymore. Some relationships don't need repair. They just need to stop causing damage. One evening near the end of the year, I stood on the hill overlooking the coffee fields. The wind moved through the leaves. The smell of soil after rain was the same as when I was 13. The only difference was this. This time, I wasn't sent away. I was here because I chose to be. I thought about the night I asked, "So you're really sending me away?" They didn't answer. Today, I no longer needed one. Some people would call this revenge. It wasn't. Revenge requires someone to lose. I only wanted to keep what I built. 15 years ago, they invested in one child. Today, I invest in myself. The difference is, I don't need anyone else to fail in order to succeed. Family isn't always wrong, but family isn't always right either. Sacrifice isn't a default obligation for the child born first, and love cannot be exchanged for someone's future. They signed away the right to decide my life. I signed back ownership of it, and for the first time in my life, I belong to myself.